Welcome back, guys, to the next episode of Present Power Podcast, episode 3, with me, Daniel Butler, and Ellis Goldie. Today we're going to be talking about main topic, state of being versus state of doing. Ellis?
Oh, straight into the deep end. So I guess starting off with what I mean by it. So state of being versus state of doing can seem quite broad to a lot of people who think who'd be watching, and just even to ourselves.
Yeah, let's go over the core of it, what it means.
So I think, for me at least, the state of doing is it's being in that place where you're always thinking about moving something forwards. So you're using the brain to always be thinking and obsessing about something.
Yeah.
And thinking that you always need to be doing an action to achieve something. And then obviously physically doing the action. So whether that's maybe building a business, maybe you're competing, maybe you're in a sport or something like that. And just continuously obsessing in that state of doing. And
like always feeling like you need to get pushed and progress.
Pretty much, yeah, that's essentially what I'm saying. And there's not wrong with this state of doing. Like, we all need to do things to physically exist in the world. I mean, that's my view.
That's your view.
We do need to physically do things. But if we don't, like, actually do stuff, then, yeah, we do kind of just become almost nothing, which is too far towards being.
Too far, yeah.
And contrasting the state of doing with state of being, it's pretty much opposite in my eyes. So with the state of being, it's really just about letting go of the thoughts, letting go of the mind, letting go of the action, letting go of the compulsive need to always be doing something.
So like a state of being for you, like being able to sit in a meditation and just be able to be there and accept all the circumstances. Like, is that what you say?
Potentially, but I feel like with the state of being, it's more so about just generally throughout the day. So can we not always having to be thinking about something random? Can we just let go of the thoughts, let go of the actions that we tell ourselves we have to do? And can we just be? And when I talk about the being state, it's quite tough to describe, because it's more of a feeling than a thought. And that's the distinct difference to me between state of being versus state of doing. When you're doing a lot, you're thinking and you're doing actions, which, if you want to look at it in energy dynamics, a bit more masculine, if you want to call it, a bit more yang. Being that state of being is a bit more passive, a bit more relaxed, out of your head, being more in your body, breathing deeper, and just allowing the moment to be as it is, with no manipulation of what the moment is. It's being present, but that's my thoughts.
Interesting. For me, like, state of doing is quite a practical thing. Like, as you said, there's things we're doing every day that we need to do. You need to walk to the shop, get your shopping. That's like a state of doing. A way of doing. But I think you can always implement both of them within each other. Like, just because you're doing anything doesn't mean you can't be there for that experience. It doesn't mean you can't be grateful to the universe in that time for whatever it is you're doing, or being like present. You know, it's like shining the light on the mundane things we do every day. It's like cooking, cleaning, doing your work, going to the gym. You know, they can be like, oh, things I have to do today, but it's like, no, you can bring that state of being into it and like enlighten that process. You know, do you think you're always being?
That's a really good question.
You know what I mean? Because some people are like, oh, we're always being.
Yeah. Wow, that's a really good question. That puts it all into perspective, man.
Do you know what I mean?
You know what? I do think that, and I feel that as well. I feel that we are always being, because behind every thought and behind every state of doing, we are being. But sometimes the thoughts and the actions cover up that state of being, and we forget that we're just human beings, that we're actually here just being. And we create all these thought forms to think that we should be doing things, and that's another key word that I want to bring everyone's attention to, is like should. You know, you should do this. Okay, well, why should I do that? Who's telling me to should? Am I imposing that on myself, or am I not? But if we're thinking, then we forget about being. But the reality is, we're always being.
We forget.
we forget.
Yeah.
We forget what's important
Okay.
because we get so caught up in the external, and the external can be anything outside of your body, but the external usually tends to be career, other people, what other people think of you, how you act, how you show up physically. And I think the more we remember that, it's not, we've forgot it somewhere along the way because of all the things that get thrown at us from social media, from impositions from our parents, from society. People tell you need to be a certain way, so you forget about being you. Keyword again, being you. It's you are in that state regardless of whatever it is that you're doing. You are in it.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, that's true.
And it's just removing all the layers that stop you from getting, and realising that, because it's not that you have to achieve being. You don't do being, and you don't be doing. It's like you don't be doing, son.
So when here's a key question then. So with what you said then about the expectations people have of us, right, in society, your parents, your friends, and in life there's certain things you need to step up to. Do you know what I mean? There's certain things you need to step up to the mark, and you need to do something. You need to show someone, or you need to prove that you can do something, or you need to be responsible for an action. You need to follow through with your word, for example, something like that, or not give up on something just because you might feel like you might not want to do it at that time. How do you see that with then being yourself? Because I think a lot of this could be, when you say, okay, just be yourself, it's okay to just be yourself, but then what if yourself is not quite right, or what if yourself could be detrimental in some way, or do you see that as that's not actually yourself? Is that something else imposing on yourself?
That's another brilliant question. Yeah,
because I've thought about this a lot. Okay, let's break it down. Let's go basics. In spirituality and stuff, the self.
Yeah.
It's the self is not the real thing. The self is the ego, the thing that wants to get more, wants to be doing all the time, wants to grow, wants to live forever and have everything to be fine, just how I want it to be. Right? That's the self. I know in some traditions, and I think maybe in Hinduism as well, I'm not sure, they say there's the true self, and there's yourself, and then there's the true self. And your true self is where you're at peace, where you're strong, where you're present. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. Share your thoughts on that.
No, man, it's all that. I feel like it's all relevant. There's a lot of it, because you can say true self, false self, or higher self, lower self, and I feel that's the same thing. It just depends on what background you come from. I feel like when people are talking about, are you your true self, or are you not your true self, or are you a false self? I feel like that's coming down to the same level of, are you obsessed with achieving, doing, which usually is getting stuck in the mind and the thinking patterns and the doing patterns, because you identify with those, and that to me is the false self. You're identifying with these thought forms of. An example of a thought form would be, I need to go and do this thing because if I don't I might die, for example. It's a really extreme one, but it's probably more obvious for a lot of people to get. So I think with that, it's while I'm thinking that, do I have to identify with that? Do I have to identify with that thought and follow it through to the end and believe it and follow that thought trail?
And not be willing to maybe change or let go.
Yeah, and let go, which requires to go into the true self, or the higher self, or whatever you want to call it, which requires you to let go of that thought process, which you thought that you actually was, which is maybe false. You've let go of it, come more into being, and observe the thought for what it is, because it's still there, because we have a mental aspect of ourselves as humans, we just do.
Yeah.
You're away from it, and you're observing it, and you're going, there's that thought. You're not going, I'm the thought, and I'm going to do what it says.
You're aware of the doing.
You're aware of the doing.
Yeah.
And
I think that's key.
This is where that kind of oneness comes with it, because the way we've positioned this, I mean, I positioned it this way, really. It's versus state, being versus doing. But there's no versus because ultimately they're one.
Yeah.
It's just one's a bit more on one end of the pole versus the other.
Mm-hmm.
But really, there's a oneness in the centre of that. And it's being aware that there's a mental aspect of us that wants to do, that wants to achieve physically, which is absolutely okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And then there's the aspect of us which just wants to be.
Like people saying, "Oh, I'm just gonna go live in like a tent somewhere, live in the woods." It's like just gonna fend for myself. It's like it's hard, man. Like living in society is a lot easier. There's a reason why people live together, and the reason why people come together because we all helping each other, isn't it?
Yeah.
And like we all have values to give, and that's what I've learned a big lesson as well because. Like maybe a few years ago, I was all for like, oh, I just want to be state of being 24/7. You know what I mean? I like that's all I want to do is like I want to be in a state of being all the time because blah 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 Buddhism, meditation, whatever reasons it was, you know, and but like you're not always being the most valuable to other people. So like by being more in the state of doing, like obviously you said the one thing and they are always, but by doing more of the state of doing you can do more things. Like quite simply, isn't it? Like this podcast, for example, this requires a certain level of doing. You know, we have to sacrifice something, we have to come out here, move there, set up and do it, like and then you can give to other people and share with other people. You know, but if you're just living in the woods, then you can't necessarily do that. Like, so, and that's where I've learned as well that about your job and your profession is incredibly important to your life. Like, incredibly important. And having a skill set of things that are valuable. First of all, that can provide you with a livelihood. Most importantly, like bills, like you're saying. Also, people around you, you're going to benefit and you're going to meet. Thirdly, you're going to learn a lot more about yourself and face challenges.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? By being in that environment with other people, you know. But then there's that time where you come out of that and then you're just with you. You're just yourself. And everyone does that every day. You know, when you go home, have your shower, you watch whatever it is you're watching, you know what I mean? You relax, you do your stuff that you do. So it's balancing everything out like that, you know?
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like if you go to the woods, and the reason I use that example is because if you want to be in a complete state of being, that's usually the most extreme form of it. You know, if you're in a spiritual space, it's I'm going to go and live in the wild, and that's great. But it's also recognising you will be more in being there because you're not attached to all the distractions in society and technology, etc.
Yeah.
But to get to a level where you can actually live in that state, you have to do a lot of things to create housing and shelter in an environment like that, and that requires doing. You're not just gonna, you're still being, but you're not just there. You're not just in the woods there. I mean, you can be, but you might die because you've not done enough for the doing. So this is where it comes to. That's where that oneness comes in, because I've kind of framed this as verses, but there's no verses. It's one. And every extreme pole, love or hate, black or white, they all kind of have the same quality when it comes to the middle point. So the question is, when is it that you actually need to be thinking and doing, you know? And we was having a conversation before we started this, and something that I picked up on that I resonated with, because I was saying I was still confused about some of the things with being and doing, and you said something like, it's thinking consciously and doing consciously, which I resonated with. Do you want to expand more on that, bro? I think that'd be cool, man.
That's a good point. Like that. Yeah, that's a good point. So consciously, for me, just means with an actual intention, like doing something with an actual intention. Because naturally, we in life we get into our flow of things, don't we? We get into our little routine of things that we just like to do, and it's a little bit unconscious. And before I say this as well, people thinking unconscious equals bad, unconscious equals good, right? Like, oh, unconscious, if I'm unconscious, that's bad. I'm in my ego. like all those things. Like, first of all, unconscious is not bad at all, right? Because it's in a way it's just it's naturally what would happen. It's naturally human beings. We do in our life, we do in our things, and we get into things unconsciously.
Yeah.
Because you just in your flow state. Well, not flow state. You get into a habit, not flow state. Let me guess that. And the important thing about that is, well, the significant thing, what I was saying was, then nothing's going to really change if you're doing that, right? If you're always just in your routine, you can go in a cycle.
Yeah.
In a way, like things will always change no matter what. Tomorrow's going to be a new day, right? But you'll kind of just, you might be where you are today, tomorrow still, and then 6 months time you're going to still be in the same place. Unless you're making certain intentions, and it's a beautiful thing, man. Like when you start to like practice this, and when you start to make more intentions, good intentions about your life, that's an amazing thing, because then you can start to change for the better, and that's amazing. Like I'll give you an example. Like, let's say you wake up, before you start your day, you make your intention for the day. Some people call it praying, some people call it meditating, some people call it motivation. Do you know what I mean? But it's one and the same thing. You making your intention to make a change for the better, for a higher purpose in your life, and that's the conscious aspect of it. But you can also do that throughout your day. When you're in your job, when you're in your career, when you're in your career spaces, when you're walking, when you do mundane tasks, you can still be in that state. Like just what I was saying at the start of the podcast, you can aim to live more consciously, basically.
Yeah, I think it's a good point that everyone needs to understand. It's living consciously, living presently, living in all states, and it's working and operating from the place of intent. Why am I doing this? Why is it coming about? How am I going to make X, Y, Z happen? And being intentful. Because if you're not intentful with what you're doing, what can happen is that's when you become slightly unconscious, where it's, I'm going to go and do this thing, or I'm being in this state, whatever it is. And then the random thought pops in about something that happened a day ago or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
We
just
all
random,
know.
just without your control.
Yeah. And that's at that point you've dipped from consciousness into unconsciousness ever so slightly.
Yeah.
And if you're aware enough in that state of being to watch the thought, you can step away from that unconscious thought and go, not even do anything. You're just stepping away, observing. There's nothing you need to do.
Yeah.
State of being, that's what the consciousness for me is. You're being conscious of the unconscious thought coming in. But if you decide, it's not even a decision sometimes because it's unconscious. If that thought comes in and you're down the thought rabbit hole, before you know it, you've come out of that state of being. Now you're doing from a place of unconsciousness, and you don't really know what you're doing or why you're doing it or what the intent was originally, because now you've been caught in a loophole of unconsciousness. Great example is, I've done this loads of times, I'm not sure everyone else resonates, but in my mindset business, I go on Instagram, message people, help them out. I'll go with an intent just to message people. That's my intention, I'm conscious. Sometimes what will happen is I'll get caught by a notification that I wasn't on there originally for.
Yeah. Instagram.
And I'll tap it. Unconscious tap. Done.
Yeah.
Okay. If I'm still conscious that I've done that, I can step away.
Yeah.
If I then keep going on that rabbit hole, I'm then scrolling, I'm then looking at stories, I'm then forgetting my original intent, and that's the Instagram example, but that can be as simple as my mind's clear, it's blank, I'm doing what I'm doing and being. You're having a chat with someone, what's he think of me? They all look okay. Am I alright? You've not generated that, it's just come out of nothing. And then if you follow that, you're unconscious again. And then you forget the state of being, and you just do everything again because you're reacting to that thought that dragged you with it.
Yeah.
So you just become obsessed with those thoughts, and you do everything that you think you have to because of those unconscious thoughts. So it comes back to that point of centeredness, of
being centered,
consciousness.
Yeah,
It's there. This is the thought I want. This is what I want to have,
Mm.
and this is how I am. This is I am. I am this.
I am that. Yeah, like me and my friend were giving this little metaphor, like this little story example of like kind of about that unconscious, like let's say you're unconsciously scrolling, right?
Yeah.
Which sometimes I don't even know how I start to scroll.
Yeah.
You know, I literally the other day I'm getting to message this person on Instagram. I'm scrolling, and then 20 seconds later, why am I scrolling?
Yeah.
It just trapped me. It's like a little trap, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's like, let's say you get put in a room, and there's two buttons in front of you, right? One button is, so the first button is you press the button, you get out of the room. The other one is you get instant £1,000,000, but then your memory gets reset. So that's what we're saying. What me and my family are saying is like, as long as you continue to press that 1,000,000 instantly, you'll continue to press it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because it's like your memory's reset. So what you need to do straight away before you press anything is press the get out of the room button. Stop the scrolling straight away. Do you know what I mean? Like obviously, but scrolling's not bad. Instagram's great. You know what I mean? I think Instagram's an amazing thing when you use it right. So, but it's just being like you said, being conscious of where you're at right now. You know, and also for me is being conscious of that you can be better. Yeah, like not always thinking like I have everything figured out. You know, there's a possibility that I need to change things, that I need to be better in some way. And when I say be better, I don't mean in some not necessarily in an ego way, like in a way where like I'm more centered and I'm more conscious and I'm more responsible and I'm, you know, helping more people and I'm trying my best more and I'm getting more of my life in the ways that you do. So it's like, yeah.
That's a really good example you've used with the button thing, bro. I was my
The
mind's
button's a good
blown.
one.
The button's done me in. I'm like, whoa. But seriously, that's what a lot of it is. It's wow, yeah. That really puts you into perspective. I'm like, I've really felt some of what you said there, because that's genuinely what you're doing every time you go unconscious. You're forgetting that you're being. You're forgetting that you're here as you are now without anything else. Yeah, so I think that analogy that you used about the button was like really good because it just, for me, it set it in stone perfectly. Like, because that's genuinely every time you follow an unconscious thought, you're resetting everything that you know up until that point. You're coming out of being. You're not where you are anymore because you identified with something external that's coming from nowhere. Because that's how the human brain works. We're humans. We have that part of us that we can use consciously to understand things and to consciously and intentionally do stuff. Or we don't use our brain and our mind properly. It uses us because it has the ability to think. It has the ability to generate thought forms. So if it generates a thought form that you've not consciously thought of, you're then dragged down the rabbit hole of unconsciousness with it. Same with scrolling, same with thought, same with doing. And then those unconscious thoughts lead to unconscious actions. Right. And then you, whether that's over the course of 10 minutes, like you get that craving. Like I've had this where, like, you know, when I used to be addicted to porn or gaming, could play a game right now. That's just a random thought that's come from nothing. It's unconscious. I didn't manually think that. I didn't think I'm gonna go and play a game, but that's just come up from an old pattern. It's just
it's a pattern in your brain going blip.
Yeah, it's like that's still there if you want to go and do it. All right. And then if you follow it, you'll end up on the game or watching porn because you followed something that you've not generated. And then you're on this streak of watching YouTube. Then eventually, this has happened to me, you'll somewhere in your brain you'll go, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
What am I actually doing?
Yeah.
And you'll kind of
what are you actually doing?
Yeah, what am I doing here? And then you'll get that kind of...
That's an interesting thought.
I think
that thought's very interesting.
And that's for me, it's actually happened me recently. So I did that recently. I had a little bit of a relapse, should we call it, with those things. Not with porn, it was with gaming actually. How much fucking the porn thing's been sorted, but it's the gaming. It was the gaming, bro. The game, and it got me. It's the rabbit hole got me.
Yeah.
But with that, it's when you get that thought, you're generating that. Oh, well, what am I actually doing? To me, that's your conscious coming back in.
Yeah. So let's break that down then. So
yeah.
For me, this is very interesting. Like, when you're saying, "What am I actually doing?" What does that mean? Like what? Like, because you are doing something. You're on a game, right?
Yeah.
You're increasing your numbers. You're increasing the digital pixels.
Exactly.
You are doing something, aren't you?
Yeah.
Like you're changing something. You're, I don't know. Like you're gaming. Do you know what I mean? You're upping your score, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You know, your rank, whatever. But then your brain's saying, well, what am I actually doing? So that tells me is your brain needs more. Your soul, your heart needs to have a more meaning. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, man.
And I'm saying like generally for everyone and myself, like human beings, we need more than that. You know, like more things that are rewarding. Like a game, it can be rewarding and it can play its role, but like you said, eventually it's going to get to a point where what am I actually doing? What change? What significant thing am I doing? You know, because it's not actually significant.
Yeah.
No.
It's just a good point to bring up.
How does your conscience say that?
See,
that's amazing.
That's the crazy thing. That's where I would get caught up with. Or is that just another thing because I feel guilty for playing games as well?
Should I not feel guilty at all?
There you go. Yeah, so that's where that discernment comes in, where it's like, well, it was an hour. It's not 6 hours.
But let's say it is 6 hours.
Let's say it is, yeah.
And you feel guilty. Like, would you then think, oh, I shouldn't feel guilty? I'm like, would you continue to play?
See, that's a really good question. Well, recently, if I have played it, it's a limit, but that's just like a personal thing. I would limit it, but I feel like for those thoughts to come through, you have to have done a certain level of self-awareness work or self-discovery work for that thought to even come in consciously, or for it to even just pop in, even if it is unconscious, because you recognise that maybe it's not serving you in the best way, and to have realised that, you have had to have undone a lot of things already for that thought to even be there.
Okay.
So I feel if you're not aware that gaming's hurting you in some way, and you're unconsciously doing it, and that's all it is, and you're in the rabbit hole and there's nothing more, there might be something in the universe that bites you eventually that says, this isn't right, or this isn't serving you. It's not that it's not right, this isn't serving you. And then that brings you into awakening, or it can bring you deeper into unconsciousness, where it's, you know, maybe for example, let's say just in the gaming, for some reason, just randomly your games console just stops working for no reason, and it's like, well, I can't explain why, I don't know why, but I'm going to do everything I can to get it fixed. So at that point, are you going with being, or are you unconsciously trying to fix the thing that you think is helping you? Or let's say, an example that I could use personally, but I think would resonate with a lot of people, and I spoke about this with you before, about like sex drive and things. Let's say someone shows up in your life who was from like years ago, for example, and you get that opportunity to just be physical and indulge in that physical sexual intimacy with nothing else, and it's just purely physical. Is that you being unconscious just because you want something from that physical, or is that you being consciously going into that?
And like accepting it.
Yeah, and it's just, this is where discernment comes in, and this is where that's that balance point, that's the consciousness. It's discerning where you're at with these thoughts, because it's knowing when there's a conscious thought and when there's an unconscious one. And I'm only really conceptualising this right now as we do this, so this is really valuable for me personally, and this is valuable for I guess anyone else who's watching, you know, seeing this live of us actually conceptualising this in ourselves. But it's knowing when to discern when there's a conscious thought and an unconscious thought, and it's knowing
it's knowing
what's dragging you in what direction.
And I think it is having a morality as well.
Exactly.
Like, I think a key for this is morality. Actually having a morality and thinking those things is not acceptable and those things are acceptable. I think that's a great way to be, like, because then you can be guided to a more purposeful life. You know, it's like, and also with morality, actually implementing it into your life in a good way, because I mean this is a whole other podcast episode right here. Morality is like, but I'll just let me tie it up. Like, when you're thinking about yourself about, oh, I'm moral or I'm not moral, what matters is what you actually did. What matters is your actual deeds that you did, isn't it? It's like, you can have any idea about yourself you want, whether you're moral or immoral. We always think we are a lot more moral than we actually are. Every human being thinks that they're good, don't they?
Yeah.
That's quite interesting, isn't it? Like, we all think what we're doing is justified, what we're doing is fine, what we're doing is good.
Yeah.
It's my life. Everyone thinks like that.
Yeah, and that's it's healthy in a way, it's good in a way, because with that way the intention's generally good, even if they're not knowing that it's hurting themselves or someone else. And I think it's a great place to come from, because even if we've made mistakes or done something that's just not benefiting us or anyone, at that time,
which we do every day.
Yeah. At that time, our intention was good. So even if it was unconscious, it was still probably good. To some extent, because we thought that's what was best at the time. And it's coming back to that no judgment, because we can say right, wrong, black or white, but in reality there's no right or wrong. It's only what you discern is right or wrong. You can put a label on something and tell that's good, that's bad. But ultimately behind it all, that's just us then using the thoughts to label things to get an understanding of what things actually are.
Yeah.
So we know what to stay away from and what to go towards. But the reality is, beneath it all, when you're in a pure state of being and you're not thinking, you don't know anything. And I think that's a good conclusion to verses. Is when you're in that state of being, there's no thought, there's nothing, and there's no judgment. So the reality is, behind the thought, behind the doing, behind the compulsiveness, the obsession, nothing really is right or wrong. It's just as a human, as humans, we can only conceptualize one or two things. If you look at it, like with everything that we say and with how everyone says things, we can only say like it's this or that. There's rarely ever a third way, and that's where the middle usually comes in, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which we've said today, the middle point is consciousness. It's that middle gap between all of the spectrums. It's being conscious of both ends of the spectrum and being able to manage them.
Yeah, I mean, because I think, I get what you're saying. Like, I think when you're saying like some things, it's like no right or wrong. I'm like, what are you talking about? But obviously, like, what I think is like everyone's at a different point, and sometimes, well, not all the time, we have to do what is wrong in order to repent, or in order to turn away from that. Like, and it's all part of it. Like, that's the reason why we're human, isn't it? You know, we're not perfect. Like, we are going to make mistakes so that we can grow. And if we never have the opportunity to make the mistakes, we can't grow. We can never improve. So it's like, yes, right and wrong, but also then having that consciousness, being like, well, even if I do this thing, it's not the end of the world, because I can then still change, I can then still grow, I can then still turn away from it, you know. And I think that's just a very healthy way to be in general. Yeah.
So I think there's a bit of a glitch in the mind itself. So if we just attempt to use the mind and the brain to understand everything, we can't really realise oneness because we've tried to understand oneness.
Do you think then that humans um, can we contemplate what God is, or can we ever really understand what the universe is, and like all you know all the oneness there? Because
Yeah.
for me, I don't think we can, like, this idea about like knowing everything or like becoming enlightened. Like, I think it's in turn a level of like accepting that everything is one, rather than trying to find out what everything is.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, as like what you're saying about like trying to do it all and trying to know everything. Like, we need to sometimes accept that we can't know everything.
Yeah, it's that acceptance element.
Yeah.
I don't think we can know everything, but we would like to think that we can, and we will go to every length to figure out things. And I'm not just speaking for us two, I mean everyone. That's science, really, isn't it? It's like it's trying to understand
that's what
everything.
Science is trying to do.
You're trying to understand the unknowable. You're trying to quantify the unknowable. And that's the one case where I will use the word trying, because I tend to be aware when I use that word, because you really do have to try to understand the unknowable, because it's unknowable.
Yeah,
like,
by nature.
It is unknowable.
Yeah.
And we will always conceptualise what we think something is, but ultimately we can only think what it is. We don't actually know what it is. And that's where I think this idea of knowing everything and becoming one with everything isn't a thought-based thing anymore. And this is what I'm thinking with the mind. The mind limits you. It's a tool to be used consciously to help you reside physically on this earth with doing and thinking and planning and being intentional. But I don't think it's the only tool, and I've been guilty of overusing that tool since I've been born, and I think we all have. The old human race has. But I think there is more, and it's not using the mind.
It's using your heart.
Your heart and your feelings, your emotional body, which is behind the mental. It doesn't come after the mental, it comes behind. Because when you look at when you're a kid, you don't come out with conscious mental thought. You don't come out the womb knowing everything. You don't mentally think about things. And probably until you're about 7, when you can actually start consciously seeing the world through your eyes. It's before that you don't really remember visualising or seeing anything. When you come out the womb, maybe you can go back and visualise it, but really you don't know. You still don't know, because you don't know whether you were seeing then, but you was something that came out of a vessel. And that's getting back to that level. You was something that came out of a vessel.
You were something. You were all born in the world naked.
You came out of nothing.
Completely reliant on everyone else.
You came from nothing. And we all did. We came from some void somewhere.
And I mean, I wouldn't say we came from a void.
Well, whatever.
I mean, for us trying to remember what was before there, I think you can't remember what you were in your past life.
With your mind.
Right now, you can't just sit here and think, oh yeah, and then that happened. Like, it's something deep. It's a deeper truth. It's a reality that exists independent of what you think. Do you know what I mean? It's like the reality is it is like, I would use the word God, you know what I mean, or like that's what I would say. Like, the things are that's it, isn't it? I can't even explain it.
So
there you go.
We're now setting the example of the mind being a limit for people who are watching this, bro.
I reached my limit.
Yeah, and this is where I think people take plant medicines and attempt to get to this level what we're at now, where it's like we can't really go any more than that with words. And that's the thing, I think, to know it all, to understand the unknowable, you can't always use your brain. You must transcend that, like transcend the thought.
I think you can know it in your heart though, without any language.
and the feeling, and that's when we get talking about feelings and being. That's where it's like, what do you mean by feeling? How can you quantify just go with the flow? And that's the mind coming in trying to break it down and analyze. It's like, nah.
The mind and the heart are the two polar aspects, aren't they?
What's that?
The mind and heart are like light and darkness, in a way. I just
Physically, yeah.
It's like the heart and the mind are like almost opposite.
Right? Yeah. It's a good point, bro.
Because the mind is like trying to compute things, and the heart's just like, I need to be like this. Do you know what I mean? The heart's just like, I want to be like this. This is how I feel.
Yeah.
This is the truth. And then your mind's a bit more like, like a calculator or something. You know, like trying to break everything down.
Nice.
Yeah.
And that's where the confusion sometimes comes to me. It's when do I use my mind? When do I use my heart? And it's like, but then that's getting trapped in. Then it's getting trapped into, is it the right time to use my brain? Is it the wrong? And then that's when you're getting trapped in the dual aspect of life again.
Use them together, maybe.
This is what I'm feeling. Yeah, this is what the full theme of this has been today. Really, consciousness was that bit middle point between being and doing. Again, it's being conscious of the brain and the heart.
Yeah, use them together. You know, that's a good way of looking at it.
That's, you know, when you just get that weird feeling like my brain didn't compute that, but I felt it all through my cells, and that was a weird moment. I just thought I'd say that. Yeah, I thought that was important to bring that to everyone's attention.
No, that's important.
That was strange, bro. You know, when you just feel everything and it just goes like that.
Yeah, change. A chemical reaction. Some DNA just changed.
Something's just done that.
Some DNA just got like.
Yeah. Don't know what's going on today, bro.
Who knows? Stranger things are happening every day, you know. But yeah, man, I think that's a good place to wrap it up just before we.
Before we get too far.
Before we go too deep down the rabbit hole. Yeah, that was good convo, man. Like some deep topics there. Like.
Take it away. Well, I think to bring it back to the mind, so everyone who's with us here is back on Earth, and you're not floating away into the clouds. Can you be in the middle point? Is there a way to reside closer towards balance? Is there a way to be more towards centre? Is it possible to be there? Can you do that? Can you be that? And if you can float away if you want for a bit, but you can come back and do the things you need to do physically. Or you can do both at once. You can have times where you float away and get a little bit, I'm just chilling, whatever you want to describe it as. You can have times where you've got to sprint and do the work, but you can bring them as one and structure your life in a way that allows for both. It's using the state of doing, the mind, the heart, all of what we've said. And not just using one versus the other, because it's not versus, it's all one.
Using them different together.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, you said it very well. You said it very eloquently.